This is not hot enough. But you know what is hot? Animal sacrifice. I kind of love the idea of animal sacrifice. Like, it's such an easy way to atone for your sin. Like, when I shoplifted in Claire's when I was younger.
Shoplifter!
All I had to do was slaughter an animal, and I'm good. Welcome back to And God Was Like, Alma's weekly Torah portion reading with me, Arielle Kaplan, who was most definitely paying attention during 14 years of Hebrew school and definitely not passing notes to my friends about who hooked up with who at last week's party. This week we're talking Vayikra, the first parsha in the book of Leviticus, and it begins with an adorable misunderstanding between God and Moses. The first word, Vayikra, and God called out, ends with a small aleph instead of a normal-sized aleph because Moses thought that he happened upon God, just like casually bumped into him at the tabernacle, and God was like, no, I actually called on you specifically. So they compromised and put the small aleph there. I just would love to see a sitcom or reality TV show starring Moses and God because they're just like the ultimate odd couple. So this week's parsha concerns animal sacrifices.
I know that there's a sacrifice and I'm ready to pay the price.
Like I said, that's can be super sexy in a way.
Meow.
It's the ultimate way to get forgiveness from God.
Forgiveness.
Sort of like making dinner for your partner when they're upset.
It's like nothing you've ever tasted.
So this is ripe with a lot of boring information that I will try and spruce up. So we're talking about a lot of different sort of animal sacrifices. The first one being a burnt offering.
Fire!
So in these burnt offerings, you can have any sort of male cattle, sheep, goats, anything really will do as long as there are no blemishes, God says. So like if you have pimples like me, you're safe.
I'm a zit. Get it?
Oh, and if you're a broke bitch, you can just use birds, specifically turtle doves or young pigeons. Obviously, he's not a vegan.
Fish are friends, not food.
This type of burnt offering is completely burnt, to be redundant, and no one else can eat it like in other sacrifices. This is just an offering to God and not about erasing any sins or what have you. Chapter 2. Here's where we talk about meal offerings, which are different from the burnt offerings.
Let the feast begin.
How to make these meal offerings. They're comprised of grain, oil, mixed with frankincense, just is like super witchy to me, and everything needs to have salt. He's very, very explicit about the salt. And no leavened anything or honey, because the only sweet savor he wants is like burnt animal.
Ew.
And he's also like, you can use fruits, I guess, but those won't send a sweet savor to God. So like, why even bother, kind of?
Hey, Apple, hey.
God describes the person who gives this kind of meal offering as nefesh, which means soul, because the ingredients for this offering actually cost less than the burnt ones with the animals. So basically what he's saying is that this one is for poor people.
Help me, I'm poor.
Chapter 3, the peace offering. So unlike a burnt offering, this can actually be of a male or female animal. The burnt offerings are just male. Sucks to be you. The Kohanim will dash the blood on the Mizbeach, which is the altar, burn the food, and then that pleasing odor will go up to God.
My God, what is that smell?
In this chapter, we also learn that we are not allowed to eat any blood or fat.
Is butter a carb?
That's all for me, God says.
How rude!
Chapter 4/5, because in these two chapters, we talk about, or God talks about, guilt and sin offerings. So he talks about the unintentional sins and these purposeful sins. Why would you atone for something that you didn't even know you committed? Because, bitch, ignorance is not bliss.
Oh shit!
Anyway, the rabbi said that the priests are responsible for helping the sinner atone.
I'm a sinner, I'm a saint. I do not feel ashamed.
But God is obviously the one responsible for giving that forgiveness. So in chapter 4, God says that if a Kohen sins, if Aaron or one of his sons sin, guilty, then they have to bring a bull, dip a finger in blood, sprinkle it 7 times at the veil of the sanctuary. I don't know, it's kind of cool. And if the whole community sins, the elders of the community bring in a bull, because we're all responsible for community.
We're all in this together.
Social distancing. When a prince sins, if you were listening, I said earlier, if the Kohen sins and if the whole community sins. God changes his words here. He says when a prince sins, because when he says if, he's saying it's way less likely that a whole community will sin, and it's way less likely that my priests will sin, but individuals are way more likely to stray from the path. Like, at me, why won't you?
I'm the bad guy. Duh.
So when a prince sins, he's got to bring in a male goat, burn the fat, yada, 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 yada.
Yada, yada, yada.
Chapter 5. Okay, here God continues.
Please, continue.
And he begins with, if you see something and you don't say something, you gotta sacrifice an animal. If you touch an unclean animal or person, you gotta sacrifice. If you break a promise, you gotta sacrifice. If you thieve, return it, bitch.
Return to sender.
So you're probably wondering why we don't sacrifice today. After the destruction of the Second Temple, the rabbis were like, you know what, we can just pray and like donate money, and I feel like that's pretty chill. But also because it was a sin to perform an animal sacrifice anywhere but the tabernacle, which was like a makeshift moving synagogue, and then the first and second temples were like the place to be.
The place to be.
Once it was destroyed, again, the rabbis were like, not much we can do, like we can just pray, whatever.
Not a terrible idea.
But a lot of Orthodox Jews believe that when the Mashiach returns, the temple will just like fall down, pre-built, back in Jerusalem, and then we can return to sacrificing animals. So like that's something fun to look forward to.
I'm so excited.
But why did we sacrifice at all is something you're probably wondering more. The rabbis say that it was really cathartic to release your anger and guilt by slicing and dicing cattle. So it was kind of like kickboxing.
It's called a jab.
But like make it religious. And others also say it was sort of like a dopamine high. So for those of you who are trying to kick a drug habit,
Is that a joint, man?
have you tried animal sacrifice? Next week, Parashat Tzav, more on sin offerings, and Aaron and his sons are quarantined in the tabernacle for 1 week. Will they survive? Tune in next week.
Love you, bitch.